My child's dad vanished at my weakest. Years later, he begged for forgiveness. Danielle Carter was a determined young woman whose life completely changed when she fell in love with Rick Lawson, an ambitious entrepreneur who seemed to have the world at his feet. Between promises and illusions, she believed in love but ended up facing one of the most fragile moments of her life, all alone. From abandonment was born not only pain, but also the strength to rebuild her own story and raise her son with dignity and courage. Years later, fate brought Danielle and Rick face to face again, but now in very different positions. She was independent and respected in the community. He was a millionaire surrounded by power and scandals. The reunion brought back secrets, wounds, and choices that could change everything forever, in a journey marked by suffering, resilience, and lessons that no one would come out of unscathed. Before we begin this emotional story, I want to know from you. Where are you watching from? Comment your city or country so I can get to know better who's following along. And if you enjoy love stories filled with emotion, twists, and endings that carry life lessons, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any story and will also help this space grow and bring even more content made for you. The late afternoon heat in Atlanta made the city sparkle. The mirrored glass of the Lawson Tech building reflected the orange sky as Danielle Carter, 24 years old, with dark brown skin glowing under the sunlight, her curly hair in long, well-kept braids, climbed the steps with her internship folder pressed against her chest. She had intense, curious brown eyes and a natural care for her appearance, a white blouse, black tailored pants, and discreet sneakers. Her heart was racing not just because of the opportunity, but also because of the silent promise of a new beginning. Inside, the open space buzzed with voices and keyboards. Large screens displayed growth charts, and slogans pinned to the walls celebrated speed and disruption. A tall man, 6'2", light-skinned, dark blonde hair slicked back, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit, appeared in the hallway as if the room had been designed to frame him. Rick Lawson, 26 years old, his blue eyes as cold as they were calculating, stopped in front of Danielle with a quick, practiced smile. "You must be Danielle. You're early. I like people who arrive before the clock," he said, extending his hand. "I just don't like missing the first bus," she replied, trying to sound calm as she felt the firmness of his handshake. He guided her past desks filled with laptops and plants. "Here we believe ideas matter more than titles." "But results, that's our official language." She nodded, watching the restless energy of the place. "I understand. I promise to speak that language." The rest of the morning, Danielle dove into reports. Her sharp mind picked up patterns that older analysts overlooked. At the end of the day, Rick crossed her path again, noticing the whiteboard where she had left clear and concise notes. "These arrows here." "You linked user loss to checkout loading delays," he asked, stepping closer. 10 seconds of waiting, a 12% drop in conversions. It's like the site is asking people to give up, she said. "If we cut it down to 3 seconds, the curve suggests a solid recovery." Rick raised his eyebrows, genuinely impressed. "I like people who don't just see the problem but also trace the curve of the solution." Danielle gave a small smile. "Curves are more honest than promises." He laughed. "See? Lines like that make investors open their wallets." The next night, the office was half empty when the lights dimmed and a light rain tapped against the windows. Danielle was reviewing a spreadsheet when Rick appeared with 2 cups of coffee. "Strong coffee. Atlanta doesn't stop, and neither does Lawson Tech." "Thanks. I didn't know CEOs made coffee." "I don't make it." "But I know how to choose," he said, handing her the cup. and I know how to recognize rare people. You're good." "I'm dedicated," she corrected, gently. "Good is what I plan to be. Great, if they let me." "Ambition looks good on you." He studied her briefly, like someone weighing risks and rewards. "But I'll warn you, I'm obsessed with winning. Sometimes that scares people." "Goals scare me less than lack of direction," she replied. The rain grew heavier, creating a hypnotic rhythm. Rick leaned against the desk next to hers, close enough for Danielle to catch the woody scent of his aftershave. "Do you believe in timing? Like when two people show up in the same hallway of life at just the right moment?" "Timing is just a story we tell when things work out," she said, with a half smile. "And when it works out really well, it becomes a story to tell at dinners," he teased with a touch of charm. "Dinners like tomorrow." She held his gaze. In it, she saw an eager spark that wasn't just personal. It was the gleam of someone calculating every step. Even so, something in her stomach tightened, a feeling mixing curiosity with caution. "Tomorrow I finish a report at 7. Perfect! Dinner can be at 8. The next day, they chose a modern restaurant on the Beltline, with cozy lighting and soft soul music. Danielle wore a simple navy blue dress, medium-heeled sandals, and left her braids loose, framing her face. Rick carried himself like someone used to being noticed. A dark suit, an expensive watch, a controlled smile. "I like this place," she said, looking at the menu of reinvented Southern dishes. "I came here when I closed my first investment. The food tastes like victory," he said, relaxing his shoulders. "What brought you to technology, Danielle?" "Curiosity?" "I wanted to understand how numbers explain behavior, and maybe prove to myself that I can handle things without asking anyone for help." "Independence is attractive," he replied, leaning in. "But it's also heavy. Sometimes sharing the load is the smartest move." She took a sip of water, weighing her words. "Depends on with whom." "With me," he said, like someone closing a pitch. "I recognize talent. And when I like it, I open doors." "And what do you want in return, Rick?" Danielle asked, with a frankness that threw him off for a moment. He smiled slowly. "I want you to keep up with the pace. Life here is fast. We don't waste time on doubts that don't turn into results. Doubts can prevent falls." She set her fork down firmly. "But I know how to jump when I have to." The conversation flowed like a game. He threw promises of the future, projects, trips, introductions to investors. She countered with sharp questions, refusing to be hypnotized. Still, there was magnetism. When their fingers touched as they shared dessert, a faint spark ran through both of them. As they left, the night wind lifted Danielle's braids. Rick adjusted her coat on her shoulder with a courteous gesture. "Can I drive you home?" "Uber's fine," she replied, with a small smile. "But thank you." He nodded, keeping his impulse under control. "Tomorrow morning, I want to show you something on the road map." The next day in the elevator, Rick kept his distance, and yet the air felt tight when she stepped in with a coffee in hand. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Worst question for someone who slept little," she replied, laughing. "I assume because of ideas," he said, quickly sizing her up. "Or because of promises," she shot back, letting the door close. In the weeks that followed, discreet encounters piled up alongside work hours, dinners at improbable times, rides dropped off at the corner to avoid office gossip, short messages exchanged between meetings. Danielle noticed his obsession with his career, always looking at his phone, always rushing tomorrow forward. Even so, there was occasional tenderness, revealed in unexpected details. Have you noticed the way you furrow your brow when you find a solution? He remarked one night, in the empty office. It's like a song reaching the chorus. I'm more of a bridge than a chorus, she said with a smile. I like the crossing. Then come, he whispered. And the space between them dissolved in a restrained kiss, calculated at first, then more sincere. Danielle, who had always sought stability, felt her soul lean toward the edge of risk. Rick, who had always avoided distractions, found comfort in a presence that challenged him to be more human than his own ambition. And though they both tried to keep the secret safe from office eyes, Atlanta seemed smaller every night they left through different doors to meet at adjacent corners. I don't promise endings, Rick warned in the car seat, the moon slicing through buildings in the distance. I promise intensity. Intensity without direction becomes a fire, Danielle said, tucking her braids behind her ear. But I know how to use an extinguisher. He laughed, defeated by her charm. Then stay. Tomorrow. The day after, as long as it lasts. She drew a deep breath, weighing the gap between prudence and desire. As long as it makes sense. And for a few weeks, it all did. Between spreadsheets and whispers, passion was born where it was least advisable, under the spotlights of ambition and in the shadows of a secret. The week began with a heavy sky over Atlanta and a lingering dizziness that followed Danielle into the mirrored elevator of Lawson Tech. The cold lights of the open space seemed harsher than usual, and the smell of freshly ground coffee, which usually energized her, this time turned her stomach. She tucked her braids behind her ear, took a deep breath, and tried to focus on the charts. The conversion column flickered before her eyes. You look pale, said Mia, a product analyst with medium brown skin, straight bob-cut hair, and clear glasses. Want some water? I want to finish this before the 10 o'clock meeting, Danielle replied, forcing a smile. Her hands were sweaty, a strange anxiety running up her neck. By 2 in the afternoon, the nausea won. Danielle rushed into the light marble bathroom, rested her cool forehead against the stall door for a second, and swallowed hard. When she came out, she looked at herself in the large mirror, circular lights reflecting in her eyes. Calm down, she whispered to herself. Maybe it's just exhaustion. On the way home, traffic on Peachtree Street crawled slowly, and the radio talked about a tech conference that would bring CEOs from across the country to Atlanta. Danielle stopped at a pharmacy with a red sign, grabbed a pregnancy test and several bottles of water. At home, her one-bedroom apartment smelled of lavender soap. The clock read 7:12 p.m. when 2 pink lines appeared clearly, as if they had always been there, waiting for her. She sat on the rug, legs folded like a butterfly, the test between her fingers. I'm pregnant, she said softly. A cold fear washed over her, followed by a tenderness that filled her chest in an unfamiliar way, like an unexpected embrace. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Rick, deleted it, retyped, then decided to call. Danielle, it's late. He answered in his steady voice, control laced into every syllable. I need to see you. Tonight? She said firmly. A short pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in his black sedan, gleaming under the streetlights. Dark suit, loosened tie, a watch that caught flashes of distant lightning. Danielle opened the door, her heart pounding as if she were late for something she had never known existed. You look like... he began, closing the car door. Something happened at work. It's not work. She took a deep breath. I'm pregnant. The silence was so dense it seemed to muffle the sound of the rain beginning to hit the windshield. Rick stared at the horizon as if searching for a slide with the right answer. His jaw tightened. The car, parked in front of Danielle's brick apartment building, became a capsule where time stretched. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice lower. "Twice, and I'm seeing a doctor tomorrow." She kept her eyes fixed on him. Steady. "I didn't plan this, but I won't pretend it doesn't exist." He ran his hand through his hair, undoing the neatness of his style. "Danielle, I'm 3 days away from presenting the new product to investors. You know what that means." "I know what a child means," she replied, realizing her own voice had hardened. Rick let out a long sigh, his chest rising slowly. I don't know how to be a father right now. It's a critical moment. If this leaks, if the press gets it, if my family... You don't know my father, Danielle. He doesn't accept deviations from the plan." "Plan?" she repeated, fighting not to tremble. "I'm not a deviation. That's not what I meant." He looked back at her, his restless blue eyes flickering. "I want to have this conversation properly. Tomorrow, after the 7 o'clock meeting, at the office, no rushing." She nodded, not in agreement, but in exhaustion. "Tomorrow." The next morning, Danielle went to the neighborhood community clinic, a white room with health campaign posters and a nurse with a sweet smile, light brown skin, and faint freckles. Tests, dates. The monitor beeped softly. The nurse, in a neat white coat, laid a hand on Danielle's shoulder. "Congratulations!" In the cab to work, she looked out the window as Atlanta's streets opened like lines of destiny. Movie theaters with colorful posters, red brick churches, a group of students laughing loudly on the sidewalk. Her phone buzzed with a message from Mia. Meeting moved up to 6:45. Rick's nervous about the pitch. Danielle took a deep breath. So am I. Arriving early, she quickly reviewed her notes. At 6:47, she entered the glass room on the top floor. Rick stood with his back to her, on the phone with someone from the board, his suit without a crease, wall screens displaying metrics. When he hung up, he turned with an automatic smile that vanished in a second when he saw her. His expression became the same as in the car, frozen in indecision. "Thanks for coming," he said, swallowing hard. "We need to be rational." "Rational like someone who signs a contract and disappears from the next meeting?" she shot back, her voice calm. "I've already seen the doctor. It's happening." "I don't doubt it, just listen to me." He pulled up a chair, fingers interlaced. "I grew up hearing that legacy is what we build in the eyes of the world. My father repeated that at every dinner. If I step off now, everything I've built could collapse. The press, the investors, my family. I need to control the narrative." She gripped the edge of the table, feeling the cold wood. "Control the narrative. There's a child." "I know." His voice finally cracked a little. "I'm only asking for time." "Time for what? To hide me until your product goes viral?" Danielle shook her head. "I'm not a footnote." His eyes blinked rapidly, as if some emotion tried to pierce through his polish. "I'll fix this, Danielle. I promise. I just need to get through this week." "Promises don't feed anyone," she said, standing up. "I'm going to work." He stood still, watching her leave with firm steps. The hallway smelled of fresh paint, and the walls displayed catchy phrases about courage, risk, and the future. Danielle thought that courage, in that place, might mean something else. The following hours were a blur of charts and phone calls. Danielle avoided looking at her phone until the end of the day. When she finally left, The sun was already down, and the lights of Atlanta flickered in the distance. She sent a short message. "I need to see you. Tonight?" The status showed, "Delivered," then read, "No reply." The next day, he didn't show up at the morning stand-up. The team said Rick had flown out for an emergency meeting with investors. "Back tomorrow," someone added. Danielle went to the break room to make ginger tea. Her hands trembled. On the third day without Rick, the building looked the same as always. But everything inside her was different. A calendar notification popped up. Meeting with legal at 3 p.m. She hadn't scheduled anything. She opened her email and found an automated message, cold and perfectly worded, signed by compliance. It stated that, due to internal adjustments in the internship program, some contracts would be reevaluated. "This is a joke," she whispered. Her chest tightened. She took a deep breath and marched to the HR director's office, a tall, light-skinned woman with her hair pulled into a low bun and an expression trained for neutrality. "Danielle, please sit," the director said, folding her hands over the white desk. "We've received instructions for restructuring. Some internships will be ended and reassigned. It's nothing personal." "Of course it's personal," she replied, without raising her voice. 3 days ago, I had a mentor. Today, I have an email. What changed?" The director held her gaze a second too long. "We have deadlines." "I can't comment on strategic decisions." "Then comment on the human ones," Danielle said, her small braids brushing against her jacket. She breathed deeply to keep from breaking. "I'm in a sensitive moment. I can refer you to our assistance program," the woman offered, pulling a card from the drawer. "They help with guidance." Danielle left with the card in her pocket and her heart heavy. Outside the building, the city's warm wind mixed with a light drizzle, just like the night of the announcement. She tried calling Rick. Voicemail. She sent a message. Silence. At home, the apartment felt bigger and emptier. The clean kitchen, the glass on the counter, the pregnancy test tucked away in the bathroom drawer, like proof of a chapter someone insisted on denying. At midnight, a faint noise at the window announced the storm forming. Danielle pressed her forehead to the glass, the city blinking like an airplane panel. "I am not alone," she whispered, her hand resting on her belly. The phone vibrated. It wasn't Rick. It was a news report on her feed highlighting Lawson Tech. CEO moves up launch and attends private dinner with international funds. The photo showed Rick in a new suit, a calculated smile, flashes reflected in his pupils. She felt the nausea return, this time without warning. She went to the bathroom, gripped the sink until the world stopped spinning. When she lifted her face, the mirror reflected a woman she didn't fully know yet. Eyes steadier, skin glowing with drops of sweat. The line of her jaw sharpened by a decision beginning to form. Her phone vibrated again. An email? This time from a personal address she didn't recognize. "Danielle, I'm sorry for disappearing. I need a few days away from everything. I'll reach out when I manage to put things in order." 3 lines. No mention of the pregnancy. No question. No meeting. It was a goodbye disguised as a pause. She replied with only one sentence. "The things that matter don't wait for those who run away." She turned off the living room light and lay on her side, hugging a pillow. The storm finally poured over Atlanta, heavy, raw, as if the sky had decided to say everything Rick hadn't had the courage to. In the middle of the noise, a dry knock on the door made her hold her breath. 2, 3 knocks, someone insisting. Danielle sat up in bed, her heart drumming a hurried rhythm. She thought of neighbors, messages, news. Aunt Vaughn, For a second, that felt like a cliff's edge. She wished it were him. The sound of that rainy night gave way to a deafening silence. Danielle woke every day waiting for a message, a call, any sign of Rick. But days turned into weeks, and on the other side there was only emptiness. The phone on her nightstand vibrated only with automated emails and social media notifications. Not a single word from him. At the office, the looks began to change. Her belly was still discreet, but the nausea and medical absences stirred whispers. In the break room, 2 co-workers whispered, thinking Danielle couldn't hear. It's always the same. Career cut short. And who could she have gotten involved with? Danielle felt her face burn, but kept her composure. She grabbed her mug and left without answering. The loneliness in the hallway felt heavier than the pregnancy itself. On her 3rd doctor's visit, she ran into Mia, the analyst friend, in the parking lot. "You disappeared," Danielle said, her voice tinged with hope. Mia lowered her eyes, embarrassed. I like you, but I don't want trouble with the directors. They said your situation might complicate the team. Danielle's throat went dry. My situation? It's a baby. Mia, not a virus. The friend tried to smile but stepped away, leaving only a timid wave. Danielle realized, in that moment, that the friendship was crumbling along with the other ties. A week later, she was called into HR. The same director with the flawless bun received her with a neutral expression. Danielle, unfortunately, your spot in the internship program will be terminated. The official justification is restructuring. Danielle pressed her fingers against the chair. Official? She repeated, holding back tears. And the real one? The director hesitated, but her coldness didn't falter. The company needs people available full-time. You will have different priorities. Danielle stood, her voice firm. My priority is surviving. And I'll do that, with or without loss in tech. She left without looking back, feeling her belly stir slightly, as if the baby sensed the storm. One lonely night, Danielle decided to call the Lawson household. A firm female voice answered. Lawson residence, good evening. Danielle swallowed hard. I'd like to speak with Richard. On the other end, a short, cold silence. He's not available. Who's calling? Danielle took a deep breath. It's Danielle. I'm expecting his child. The reply was an icy breath. I suggest you don't call again. Richard has bigger commitments. Good night. The phone was hung up without leaving room for a reply. Danielle remained frozen, the receiver still against her ear, as if needing to confirm it had really happened. That same day, her intern badge and final termination letter sat on the desk in her small room. She opened the window to feel Atlanta's damp wind. Down below, the cars moved on indifferently. Holding her still discreet belly, she whispered, You and me. Just the 2 of us now. A tear rolled down but was quickly wiped with the palm of her hand. There was pain, but also a decision. In that moment, she swore to herself never again to depend on anyone to stay standing. The next morning, she dreamed of Rick walking through the door with flowers, as if nothing had happened. She woke with her heart racing, alone, and understood the dream was only a reflection of longing. She stared at the dark ceiling and whispered, He made his choice. Now I make mine. And for the first time, even with fear pounding inside her, Danielle felt a thread of strength grow within. If you've made it this far, comment strength. That way I'll know you're following the story, and will confuse those who only read the comments. Ethan's midnight cries became the new soundtrack of Danielle's life. Between bottles, sleepless nights, and stacked bills, she discovered that exhaustion could coexist with the deepest love she had ever felt. The small apartment in Atlanta, with white walls and simple furniture, became both a battlefield and a refuge. Danielle cradled the baby by the window, looking out at the city lights, and whispered as if making a promise to the universe. "You'll never feel the absence I felt. I'll be everything for you." When Ethan turned 2, Danielle realized she couldn't rely on unstable jobs. She decided to turn her passion for coffee into something bigger. She started selling artisanal drinks from a makeshift stall at local fairs. The aroma of roasted beans mixed with the sound of street musicians, and soon neighbors were saying, "You need to open a place of your own." With the little she had saved and the help of a small community loan, she rented a spot in the heart of the historic neighborhood. The walls were old, exposed brick, and the dusty windows let in timid beams of light. Danielle saw there not just a business, but a dream with deep roots. She painted the sign with her own hands, Roots and Brews. On opening day, friends, neighbors, and the curious walked in, drawn by the aroma of freshly ground coffee and the sound of a soft saxophone playing in the background. The wooden tables were simple, but every detail carried identity. Paintings by local Black artists, a shelf filled with books by African American authors, and an entire wall dedicated to community photographs. Danielle, in a brown apron, her smile tired but genuine, served each cup with the feeling she was offering more than a drink. She was offering a sense of belonging. "This place has soul," said an older man with graying hair, holding a mug. "Atlanta's needed something like this for a long time," Danielle answered with a sparkle in her eyes. "It's more than coffee. It's our story." Ethan grew up among tables and aromas, running around the customers who already treated him like the cafe's mascot. At 5 years old, he helped arrange napkins and received tip coins as if they were treasures. "Mom, when I grow up, I'll be the boss here," he said with a smile that resembled the brightness of summer mornings. Danielle laughed, stroking his curls. "You're already my partner." The days weren't easy. There were months when the register barely balanced, suppliers delayed, and nights when Danielle cried in secret in the small office in the back. But every time she thought of giving up, she remembered the loneliness of her pregnancy, the closed doors, and the voices that said she wouldn't make it. Then she lifted her head and started again. In no time, Roots and Brews became more than a cafe. It was a stage for poetry nights, debates, small jazz shows. Young Black students gathered there to study, artists displayed their work, and single mothers found support. Danielle came to be seen as a symbol of resilience, a woman who turned pain into a meeting point, bitterness into a sweet aroma. On a special night, as she closed the cafe, Danielle held a sleepy Ethan in her arms. Leaning against the glass door, she looked at the city lights reflecting on the painted sign. Her heart tightened in silence, remembering the past. All of this came from pain, son, but also from love. Ethan, half awake, murmured, "I love you, Mommy." Danielle closed her eyes, hot tears rolling down. It was living proof that abandonment hadn't been the end, but the beginning of something much greater. And as she held her son, a luxurious black car drove slowly down the street. Stopping a few meters ahead, the headlights lit up the Roots and Brews sign for a few seconds before switching off. Danielle didn't notice, but someone was watching from inside, as if drawn to a past that had never stopped weighing. That Saturday morning, Danielle was arranging fresh flowers in glass bottles on the tables at Roots and Brews. The cafe was filled with laughter and conversation, as always. Ethan, now 6, played in a corner with building blocks. his laughter echoing like music through the room. The smell of ground coffee filled the air when the door opened slowly, and silence fell across the place. A man walked in, tall, wearing a tailored navy blue suit, leather shoes gleaming under the vintage lamp's light. His dark blonde hair was slicked back, and his blue eyes scanned the space until they landed on Danielle. It was Rick Lawson. Time seemed to stop. She felt her body stiffen, her breath grow heavy. Customers exchanged looks, recognizing the figure from magazine covers. Billboards, commercials praising his tech empire. The billionaire CEO, the man who had abandoned her. Rick walked to the counter, never breaking eye contact. "Danielle," he said softly, almost a whisper, but steady. She, still holding the tray in her hands, kept her composure. "Rick." A tense silence lingered, until he drew a deep breath. "I won't want to see my son." Danielle's heart raced. A mixture of anger, surprise, and fear coursed through her veins. 6 years, Rick. 6 years without a call, without a word. And now you show up and want to see my son. He leaned on the counter, his voice loaded with something between regret and urgency. "Our son. I know I was wrong, but I want to make it right." Danielle gripped the dish towel in her hand, trying to contain the fury burning inside. Make it right. "You think life is an app you can just update to a new version. It doesn't work like that." He breathed deeply, averting his eyes for a moment, as if carrying a heavier weight. "Things have changed. I've changed. I want to be part of his life." Before Danielle could answer, Ethan ran up to the counter holding one of his building blocks. His messy curls shone in the light, his brown eyes full of innocence. "Mom, look what I made." He froze when he noticed the man standing there. "Who is he?" Danielle crouched, her heart pounding. "He's an old acquaintance." She held her son's shoulder tightly. Rick stared at him, his eyes welling as if the reality of fatherhood had finally pierced his armor. "Ethan," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm your father." The boy frowned, confused. Danielle stood immediately. "That's enough for today." "Ethan, go play inside." The boy, intrigued, obeyed, casting curious glances. When they were alone, Danielle stepped closer, facing Rick directly. "Don't you dare show up here and think you can walk in and out of his life like you did with mine." He swallowed hard. "I'm not here out of convenience. I want to be honest with you. I'm facing a problem." Danielle crossed her arms. "Problem. Must be hard carrying the weight of so many magazine covers." He hesitated, lowered his tone, almost a whisper. "My company is under investigation. Some contracts are at risk. The press is attacking me. I need to show I'm more than business, that I have values, family." Danielle felt a knot in her throat, but not from pity, from outrage. "So that's it? You didn't come back out of love. You came back because your image is on the line." Rick tried to step closer, but she backed away. "No, Danielle. I regret leaving every single day. The scandal only made me realize what truly matters." She stared at him, her eyes unwavering. "You need to prove that, because so far, all I see is the same man who ran away." Outside, camera flashes began to appear discreetly. 2 photographers waited, hidden among cars. Rick noticed, rubbed his face nervously. Danielle followed his movement and understood. His arrival here wasn't coincidence. It was calculated. She stepped back slowly, her voice cold. "You didn't just come for him. You came to save yourself, and that I won't allow." The air in the cafe grew heavy. Ethan watched from the doorway, confused. clutching his toy tightly. Rick stood frozen, torn between pleading and giving in. Danielle, her heart burning, already knew that reunion was only the beginning of a war. The next day dawned with clear skies over Atlanta, but inside Danielle, the storm raged on. The encounter with Rick still echoed in her mind like thunder refusing to fade. She tried to focus on organizing the cafe, but she knew her son wouldn't get that man out of his head. When he came back from school, Ethan rushed into Roots and Brews, his blue uniform wrinkled, backpack hanging off one shoulder. "Mom?" he said breathlessly. "That man, is he really my dad?" Danielle took a deep breath, kneeling to meet her son's eyes. "Ethan, he is the man who helped me bring you into the world. But being a father is much more than that. It's about being present." And he wasn't. The boy's brown eyes shone with innocent curiosity. "But I liked him?" "He seems nice." Danielle swallowed hard, feeling the sting of contradiction. "Be careful with appearances, son. Not everything that shines is real." By late afternoon, the cafe door opened again. Rick walked in with the same calculated presence. But this time, he wasn't empty-handed. He carried a luxurious leather bag, the kind that catches attention before it's even opened. Ethan ran toward him, smiling. "You came back." Rick knelt down and pulled from the bag a sophisticated red remote control car, gleaming. "This is for you, champ." Ethan's eyes widened in fascination. "Wow! Mom, look!" Danielle stepped closer, arms crossed. "Rick, that's not how you win a child." He lifted his gaze. "Steady? It's just a gift. I want to make up for lost time." "Lost time isn't repaid with imported toys," she shot back, her voice sharp. Ethan turned on the car and laughed as the wheels spun across the cafe's wooden floor. The sound of his joy tore at Danielle's heart. On one hand, she didn't want to erase that smile. On the other, she felt wounded seeing it born from such an easy, empty gesture. Rick watched, as if trying to convince himself that just being there was enough. "Look how happy he is. You can't deny me that." Danielle stepped closer, staring firmly into his eyes. "I don't deny his happiness. I deny your illusion that you can buy a place in his life. You disappeared when I needed you most, and now you come back with gifts, as if that erases 6 years of silence." Ethan, distracted with the car, looked up innocently and asked, "Will you come back tomorrow too, Daddy?" The silence grew heavy. Danielle felt the ground vanish for an instant. Rick smiled, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. "If you want me to, yes. I want to," Ethan replied with conviction, hugging the toy to his chest. Danielle looked away so her son wouldn't see the tears threatening to fall. When Rick left later that night, the cafe was empty. Danielle locked the doors, put away the chairs, but the weight in her chest didn't move. Ethan, asleep on the couch, still clutched the remote control car. She covered him with a blanket and stood there, watching in silence. "He doesn't understand yet, God," she whispered. "But I do, and I won't let Rick step into his life only to walk out again." On the street, a luxury car waited for Rick. He got in quickly, and as the door closed, an aide in a dark suit sat waiting in the back seat. "Mr. Lawson, the press has found out about the child. If this story leaks before we contain it, your image could suffer irreversible damage." Rick closed his eyes, pressing his forehead into his hand. "I know, but this time it's not just about image. I need him." Through the window, Atlanta's lights reflected on the wet streets. Inside the cafe, Danielle held her son close, swearing to herself she would never allow Ethan to be used as a piece in a game of convenience. If you've made it this far, comment gift. That way I'll know you're following the story, and we'll confuse those who only read the comments. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Danielle. Rick kept coming back to Roots and Brews, always with the same impeccable posture and a practiced smile meant to soften the weight of the past. Unlike his first visits, he no longer brought expensive toys but came with ideas, papers, and promises. On a rainy afternoon, he walked in carrying a leather briefcase and sat across from Danielle, who was reviewing the cash register at the counter. "Your cafe is amazing, Danielle," he said, spreading notes across the table, "but you're limiting its potential. With proper investment, you could open a second location in Midtown, maybe even build a chain. I have contacts, investors, everything you need to grow." She closed her notebook slowly and met his gaze with firm eyes. "You talk as if Roots and Brews were just numbers. This place was born from my pain, Rick. It's more than a business." He leaned forward, trying to sound sincere. "I know. And that's exactly why it can become even bigger. Imagine how many people you could impact. And Ethan. He'd have a guaranteed future." The mention of her son made Danielle's heart waver. For a second, she pictured the boy growing up free of financial worries, attending the best schools, having doors open before he even knocked. But she quickly pushed the thought aside, tasting the bitterness of dependence. That same night, during a cultural event at the cafe, Danielle received some unsolicited advice. Lorraine, an elderly neighbor with dark skin and wise eyes, held her hand tightly. "Daughter, be careful. Men like him don't just show up without reason. He didn't come back out of love. He came back out of convenience." Danielle took a deep breath. "But he's helping, and Ethan likes him." Lorraine squeezed her hand even harder. "Liking is easy when gifts and promises are involved. But true love proves itself in silence, in daily life, when no one is watching." Those words echoed in Danielle's chest like a bell. In the days that followed, Rick intensified his visits. He arrived with contract proposals, supplier contacts, and renowned architects. One night, he even showed a digital project with a redesigned cafe brand. "Look, Danielle, this is just the beginning. You deserve the world." She looked at the designs on the tablet screen, then at her own hands that had held her son alone on cold nights, that had built walls and cleaned tables to keep the cafe alive. "And what do you get out of all this, Rick?" He hesitated, his blue eyes shifting away for a moment. "I get the chance to be with you both, to redeem myself." Danielle closed her eyes for a moment, feeling temptation gnaw inside her. To grow, expand, give Ethan the very best. But she also knew letting Rick back in meant reopening wounds that had taken years to heal. That night, lying in her small bed, Ethan sleeping peacefully beside her, Danielle stared at the dark ceiling, trapped in the dilemma. Am I denying my son a better future? Or am I protecting him from the same pain that tore me apart? Outside, on the sidewalk in front of the cafe, two reporters discreetly watched, taking notes on Rick's every move in recent days. Hidden cameras blinked, recording every gesture, every word. Danielle didn't know it yet, but her life and Ethan's were about to be exposed on a scale she had never imagined. The next morning, Danielle was opening the cafe, still drowsy, when she heard the bell ring before business hours. An elegant woman entered, beige coat, straight brown hair, a determined look behind discreet glasses. She introduced herself with a firm handshake. "I'm Claire Robinson, investigative journalist. I work for the Atlanta Journal. I need to talk to you about Rick Lawson." Danielle narrowed her eyes. Suspicious. "If you came for coffee, We're not open yet. If you came to talk about Rick, choose your words carefully. Claire took a deep breath. He didn't come back by chance, nor out of regret. Danielle's heart raced, but she kept her composure. Explain. The journalist opened her bag and pulled out some printed documents. There were business headlines, confidential reports, and photos of Rick entering closed-door meetings. Lawson Tech is under federal investigation. Inflated contracts, shady partnerships, suspicious investors. He's about to lose million-dollar government deals. Do you know what his advisors suggested? That he build the image of a responsible family man. And that's where you and your son entered the equation. Danielle felt her legs weaken. She held onto the counter, as if the ground had disappeared. You're telling me he used Ethan as a strategy? Claire nodded slowly. I'm saying that for him. Fatherhood is a public alibi. He needs to appear as the man who overcame personal mistakes, who returned to his family, who is solid both in and out of business. Anger rose like fire through Danielle's throat. Her hands trembled, her eyes burned. I knew something was wrong, but to hear this, to use his own son. The cafe door suddenly opened. Rick walked in, flawless suit, rehearsed smile on his lips, but he froze when he saw Claire. What is she doing here? Danielle turned to him, fury in her eyes. She's telling me the truth you never had the courage to say. Rick raised his hands defensively. Danielle, I can explain. Explain what? She shouted, her voice breaking. That you came back to pose as a devoted father because your company is falling apart. That you turned my son into a marketing tool. Ethan, who was sitting in the back drawing, looked up in fright. Mom? Danielle took a deep breath, trying to control her tone, but tears streamed down her face. Rick stepped closer, his voice low, almost pleading. I came back because I regret it, yes, but also because I saw a chance to do the right thing. If I'm at risk, that doesn't change the fact that I love my son. You don't know what love is, Rick, Danielle replied firmly. If you did, you never would have disappeared. If you did, you wouldn't be here now trying to buy a place you already lost. The journalist watched in silence, recording every gesture, every word. Rick tried to stay calm, but his expression betrayed desperation. Danielle, please, don't shut me out this time. She stepped forward, eyes locked on his. You don't understand. You already shut that door the day you chose to run. And now, I won't let you use it to save your golden crown. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain beginning to hit the cafe windows. Ethan, innocent, went back to drawing, unaware that the adult world was collapsing around him. Rick took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, but his mask of control seemed to crack. If you turn your back on me now, Danielle, we'll all lose. She answered firmly, without breaking eye contact. I'd rather lose contracts than lose my dignity, and I'll never again allow my son to be the showcase for your lies. Rick stood frozen, swallowing defeat. Claire closed her folder, tucked the papers away, and gave Danielle a quick look, as if confirming the truth had finally come to light. Danielle was breathing heavily, but inside, something was shifting. It wasn't just anger. It was the certainty that now she held not only her story, but also a weapon against him. Out on the street, camera flashes flickered again, as if the world was already prepared to watch the fall of an empire. The grand glass hall in downtown Atlanta glowed with golden chandeliers and constant flashes. It was Lawson Tech's Gala Night, an event that gathered politicians, business people, and the financial elite. Rick, in a flawless tuxedo, walked the red carpet alongside influential figures. He smiled for cameras, though his eyes hid growing tension. At the back of the hall, Danielle watched. She wore an elegant black dress, simple but striking. She wasn't there as a guest, but as a witness, someone carrying the truth and the weight of 6 years of silence. At her side, Claire, the journalist, whispered, "This is it. If you don't speak tonight, he'll keep using the story he built." Danielle nodded, her heart pounding. The master of ceremonies called Rick to the stage. He climbed up confidently, took the microphone, and began his speech. "This company was born from dreams and sacrifices, and I've learned that nothing is more important than family values. Today, I am a renewed man, not just a leader, but also a father." That was the cue. Danielle walked down the central aisle, her heels echoing on the marble floor. Murmurs rippled among the guests. Cameras turned her way. Rick froze on stage when he saw her approach. "Rick Lawson," she said in a steady voice that carried through the hall. "You want to talk about family? Then talk about the time you abandoned me pregnant, alone, while you built this empire you now parade as a trophy." The silence was instant. Business leaders exchanged glances. Reporters raised their cameras. Flashes burst like shots of light. Rick let go of the microphone for a moment, his face pale. The mask of the perfect CEO shattered. Danielle stepped onto the stage, her hands steady even with her heart on fire. "For 6 years I raised my son without a dime from you, without a single phone call, without an embrace. While you closed million-dollar deals, I closed overdue bills. While you graced magazine covers, I spent sleepless nights rocking a baby you pretended didn't exist." The murmurs turned into collective shock. Claire, in the audience, recorded every word. Danielle turned to the guests. "He didn't come back out of regret. He came back because his company is under investigation, and he needed to pose as a responsible family man. My son and I were reduced to a convenient alibi." Rick tried to step in, his voice breaking. "Danielle, please, don't do this here." She glared at him, unflinching. "Here is exactly where it needs to be done. In front of the world you deceived." The silence was broken by Ethan, who sat in the audience beside one of Danielle's employees. The boy, in a blue blazer, his curls neatly combed, stood up and walked toward the stage. His brown eyes were filled with confusion. "Mom, is he really my dad?" Danielle knelt, holding her son's face tenderly. "Yes, son." But a real father isn't just someone who gives a name. It's someone who stays, who cares, who protects. Rick stepped down one stair, tears finally streaming down his face. His voice broke. "Ethan, I made mistakes. I failed you and your mom. I was afraid. I was a coward. And then I tried to fix it the wrong way. But I am your father. And I beg you, give me a chance to prove it." The boy looked at Danielle, then at Rick, in silence. Danielle stood, holding the microphone, and declared before everyone, "You can ask for forgiveness, Rick, but forgiveness isn't currency to clean a reputation. Forgiveness is something earned with truth and consistency, and until now, all you've shown is convenience." Rick fell to his knees on the stage, tears running uncontrollably. "I'm begging you, Danielle, begging both of you, don't shut me out of his life. I've already lost so much. I don't want to lose what really matters." The cameras captured every second. The millionaire broken, humiliated, before the woman who had borne the weight of abandonment alone. The hall was in absolute silence, everyone waiting for her response. Danielle took a deep breath, her hand still holding Ethan's. "It's not me who decides now. It's him. the boy you ignored for 6 years. Ethan looked at his father, his innocent eyes filled with doubt and hope. If you don't leave again, maybe I'll want to know you. The hall erupted in murmurs. Rick cried harder, arms outstretched but not daring to touch. Danielle, resolute, concluded, "Then prove it. Prove you're not the man who ran away. And if you don't, never come near us again." The microphone fell into the tense silence. Danielle held her son's hand and stepped down from the stage with dignity, leaving Rick sobbing before everyone, the mask of success finally torn away. If you've made it this far, comment "forgiveness." That way I'll know you're following the story, and we'll confuse those who only read the comments. The morning after the gala scandal, Danielle woke with a lighter heart. The whole world had seen the truth, but inside she still carried a battle, not letting resentment consume her. Sitting on the porch of Roots and Brews, she watched Ethan play with colored chalk on the sidewalk, drawing stars and hearts. Rick appeared from a distance, no longer in the flawless suits he always wore. He wore simple jeans and a light shirt, his face tired, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He approached slowly, stopping a few steps from Danielle. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness yet," he said, his voice hoarse. "But I wanted to ask, just for the chance to be nearby, at least as a stranger trying to learn how to be a father." Danielle crossed her arms, her stance unshaken. "You always had a choice, Rick, and you chose the easiest way, running away. Now it's no use trying to buy back lost time with money or promises." He lowered his head. "I don't want to buy anything. I want to earn it. Even if it takes years." Ethan, curious, ran up to Rick and looked into his eyes. "Are you going to leave again?" he asked innocently. Rick knelt down to be at the boy's level. "No, Ethan, I won't leave. At least, not if you don't want me to." Danielle watched the scene, and as much as the anger still burned, there was something greater. The responsibility of raising her son without poisoning his soul with hatred. She stepped closer and placed her hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Son, love isn't bought. It's earned. If he wants to be in your life, he'll have to prove every day that he deserves it." Rick swallowed hard, nodding with tearful eyes. "I'll prove it, in every way I can." The following months were marked by slow, almost painful steps. Rick no longer showed up with expensive gifts, but with time and commitment. He took Ethan to the park, helped with math homework, or simply sat and listened to his stories without hurry. Danielle watched from a distance, wary, but little by little she saw her son smile in a different way, as if a missing piece was beginning to fall into place. One quiet night, Danielle was closing the cafe when Lorraine, the elderly neighbor, approached. "You did the right thing, daughter. Forgiveness isn't for him, it's for you. Hatred is a chain that ties us to the past, and you broke free." Danielle smiled, feeling for the first time in years a sincere peace. "Life taught me that my strength never came from him. It always came from me." Ethan ran to his mother and hugged her tightly. "Mom, you're my hero." She knelt down, holding him against her chest, tears streaming. "And you're my greatest gift, Ethan." From afar, Rick watched the scene in silence. He knew there was still a long road ahead to prove who he really was, but for the first time, he was willing to walk that road without shortcuts. And so we've reached the end of this emotional story. I want to know from you, what did you think? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments so I can understand how much this story touched you. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share it with someone who will also be moved, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've already set aside another story, even more intense, full of twists and emotion, that I'm sure will touch your heart even more.